Hi. Welcome to the No Te Rindas Intermediate English Stories podcast. Este es un podcast para hispanohablantes que quieren mejorar su comprensión auditiva del inglés de los Estados Unidos. Soy tu presentador Goyo, un maestro que vive en Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Y también soy de herencia mexicana. Una vez al mes presento una lección que enseña inglés y elementos de la cultura estadounidense utilizando una anécdota breve. Our regular listeners will note that my brother Gabe is not on the show today. From now on, I will focus on one short story per episode by myself. Gabe and I still talk quite regularly. Now, today's episode will follow a slightly different format, as I discuss with you some thoughts I have after coming back from Spain. In travels, I have noticed that people often live in blocks, like blocks of homes. Inside Sevilla, for example, there are high, multi-story buildings full of apartments or maybe condominiums. My son and I visited the outskirts of Sevilla too, or Las Fueras. Even there were buildings touching buildings with perhaps tres o cuatro pisos. In the windows, you could see that these buildings were people's homes. Plazas also create a common sense of locale and community. Even in Las Fueras, or the outskirts, there was a little park among the homes, surrounded by shops on the first floor of the surrounding buildings. So I'm noticing that people are close together in places that I visit, and that we are not close together in the United States. We're spread apart. So how do we get together? Before I go any further, let's talk about synonyms. So today I'm going to be using quite a few synonyms for talking about people associating with one another or being social with one another. So to describe social behavior amongst groups of people in English, we may say that people get together, or that they assemble, or that they meet up. A public social event might be called a gathering or a get-together. So people get together, but people can also have a get-together, which is a noun. Very strange. Now, in the U.S., many Americans, especially once they have children, consider it ideal to have a house that they rent or they own and what we call a yard in the U.S. or a garden in the U.K. In the South especially, most infrastructure was created after the car became popular. This, combined with an unhappy history of racism, means that there are enormous regions outside of cities where the dominant structure is the house, surrounded by a patch of grass, un área de grama. Once school segregation was made illegal by our Supreme Court in the 1950s, many white families moved away from cities to what are called suburbs, or barrios periféricos, and these grew very quickly. Now, when I was a child, I lived in a fairly medium-sized to small city, and we had a yard that was big enough that I could not throw a football across it, even as a teenager or adolescente. I could, however, easily kick a soccer ball from one end to the other. I'm trying to give you an idea of how much grass, how much of a yard we had. My guess is that my property occupied about 30 meters along the road. And of course, it was my job to cut the grass, or cortar la grama, and the yard was big enough that it took me more than an hour as a young man of pushing the lawnmower to touch the entire property. Now, in contrast, when I would visit my aunt, who lived inside the city of Washington, D.C., I would experience a different sort of home. My home was one story on a piece of stretched out property, and her home was tres pisos, 3 floors, with a basement and what I again call a patch of grass, or área de césped, in the front and in the back. Now, it was amazing to me that she had so little grass, because one could cut it in under 5 or 10 minutes. Their lawnmower did not even have a gasoline engine in it, but was instead just blades that you rotated by pushing the apparatus or the machine. Now, I am describing all this to you to give you a mental picture of the layout, the construction of these American cities. When everyone in a neighborhood has a piece of land to grow grass, people live farther apart than what you may be accustomed to. Do you have it in your mind? ¿Te puedes imaginar una casa aparte de otras casas por el deseo de tener un jardín? Now, in your mind, multiply that by 100 people or 1,000 people. Imagine trying to meet someone who lives 10 doors away from your house, or 10 houses up the street, as we say. Now, it might take you 5 minutes just to walk to their door. And, do you see them on a regular basis? Never. Now imagine someone 20 doors away, 30 doors away. You would not recognize them if you saw their face. No lo reconocerías porque aunque viven en la misma vecindad, viven lejos. So one criticism that I have made clear in this podcast is that we as Americans try very hard to be away from others, to be independent. One gets in a car upon leaving the home, and the car is often inside of a garage when you start. You don't have to see anyone else to leave your house in the morning. Next, you go somewhere in your car without having to sit or stand or walk next to other people. The windows in your car are up. You cannot even hear anyone outside your vehicle. If you're driving home from work, you get in your car and often drive very far from the job. It takes me 45 minutes to drive home from my job. And the whole drive time, you're alone. All so that you can enter your garage without interacting with anyone, and then go sit in your mostly empty home, where you sit by yourself, or perhaps maybe your spouse or your kids, and often just look at the internet. We really work so hard to end up mostly by ourselves, all because we want a home with a yard. Now, there are exceptions, of course. My aunt's house in Washington, D.C. did not have empty land beside it, but instead touched another house, which touched another and another. Well, say they shared walls. Now, I recently traveled to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, another city on the eastern portion of the United States, and it looked quite feasible or factible to interact with others, because even in the outskirts, las fueras, the houses were close together and people were near each other on trains and buses. I heard people on buses talk to each other as old friends, for example. And that is my next point. You have heard us talk on here many times about the need for a car in the U.S. A car is vital. It takes a long time to drive past all those yards to get to other areas of a city or suburb, or to get back to your own home. There are whole economies built around working in one's car, such as Uber or DoorDash, not unlike what I have seen in Mexico or Spain. The difference here is that, unlike those places, the driver is not an employee of a company or an individual who owns the car being driven. The person is alone in the vehicle that they have purchased. Each driver competes against all the other drivers to make their money. There is no team, no coordination. one is alone. And that is the theme that I am trying to emphasize in my introduction. We work hard in how we structure things in the U.S. to separate the individual and his or her family from others. In the minds of many people here, it is fundamental to the definition of what it means to be American. Don't ask me to be involved with others any more than I might wish to do so. Now, allow me to take a step back. To me, this is a bleak image, o una imagen desoladora. Today, therefore, I would like to try to be fair, justo, to my fellow Americans, and talk about 3 ways that Americans do indeed try to get together. How do Americans spend time with each other? How do they choose to get together? That is the goal of this episode. Please forgive my long introduction. All right, way number 1, and that's church, la iglesia. I hear on the radio and on the news about how fewer Americans believe in God or go to church, but I don't see it in my own world. Restaurants are packed, o sea, muy llenos or muy busy, at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoons, which is after most church services are over. My students describe these huge get-togethers that occur during the week, where they have church events, and they describe them as though they were concerts or social gatherings. They describe how they get to hang out with their friends. Hang out is like pasar tiempo. They have another concept called the sleepover, or pijamada, sometimes called a lock-in. Here, the children spend time together with some adult supervision inside of a church facility and receive religious instruction, but in a context that is social and designed to be fun. Although I never attended one of these myself as a child, I did in the summertime go to something similar called Vacation Bible School. In Vacation Bible School, called VBS for short, one goes during summer vacation to a church and attends lessons and does crafts, hace artesanías, with other children. I remember making friends at VBS with kids that I would not see in any other aspect of my life. So church is one way that a lot of people choose to get together. Way number 2 is sports and performance art. In my neighborhood, there are parks. They are difficult to walk to for most people, but very easy to access by car. In those parks are baseball fields. After school and on Saturdays, I see many parents seated in portable chairs, watching their kids practice and play baseball. In my school, as another kind of example, it is very difficult for me to ask a student to stay after school to receive, say, an extra lesson or to make up a test, because they have so many planned activities. They have dance and theater rehearsals, taekwondo, baseball, football, and basketball practice, and music lessons. Y oyentes, for each of those, there are parents seated in spaces off to the side of these lessons or practices, and they are conversing with each other, watching the kids, and looking at their phones. I ask myself sometimes as I see them, is this not only beneficial to the kids, but also to the parents? Are the parents receiving some much-needed social interaction by sitting with these other adults week after week and planning and traveling with them for away games or partidos de visitante? Another social act related to sports is that on Friday nights in most towns during the fall, there are high school football games, o sea, fútbol americano, claro. Now, these bring in hundreds of people from the community, including, of course, classmates and parents of players and other citizens to watch the sport. It is sacred to many towns. While at the games, of course, one sees little groups of adults standing in a circle, chatting, charlando. They're eating peanuts or drinking Coca-Cola. They're laughing. They're enjoying themselves. Friday night high school football is so much a part of American culture that it had its own TV show for many years, and it was called Friday Night Lights. Many Americans know what those lights refer to, o sea, las luces del estadio, without anyone having to explain it to them. So first was church, and then second, kids, sports, and extra activities. Finally, let's talk about festivals. Now, I drive through 2 cities to get to my job each day. They are called Roswell and Alpharetta. Several times a year, traffic will be congested in one or both of those towns because there will be a festival event there. Blue lights from police cars, extra pedestrians, peatones, and music stand out in these moments in this space. In my time in El Mundo Hispanohablante, I have seen several small desfiles or parades, often with a religious purpose. Participants dress up in costumes to convey a message through their procession. And I want to be clear, that is not what I am describing here. Festivals, in this case, almost always have a commercial purpose, where vendors, vendedores, have little stands or kioscos. They may be themed in seasonal goods, such as calabazas en el otoño, and Christmas, of course, has lots of activity related to festivals. And sometimes there is food that is the reason for bringing people together, so that there's a festival where you can just try a lot of different restaurants' types of food. There may be a band invited to play, and so people are often carrying portable chairs or coolers, neveritas, or blankets para sentarse, mantas. So in conclusion, Americans, at least those who live outside of the metro centers, spend a lot of time isolated from each other by living in homes that are separated from other homes by yards and by spending a great deal of time alone in their cars. They do, however, reach out to others socially via church, their kids' sports and activities, and occasional festivals in their towns. All right, it's time for the quiz. Question number 1. What church activity has children spend time together even late into the night? A baseball game. B, a sleepover or lock-in. Or C, a kitchen party to bake muffins. All right, the answer is B, a sleepover or lock-in is where children with adult supervision spend the night in a church facility and spend time together. Question number 2. What activity brings people in towns together on Friday nights in the autumn? Is it A, high school football, B, taekwondo tournaments, or C, jazz guitar concerts? If you said A, high school football, that is correct. And finally, for what activity does Goyo regularly see the blue lights of police cars? Is it A, piano and flute lessons, B, volleyball practices, or C, town festivals? If you said town festivals, that is correct. There are no policemen trying to protect anyone in the crowd from piano lessons and flute lessons, for example. Okay, do you have children at home that would benefit from learning English? It is now December of 2025, the month where I am introducing a new YouTube program called Where Does Gary Go? Where Does Gary Go? Like this podcast, it will tell stories, but it will also use original songs, animation, and curriculum to help children to get started in their learning of English without difficulty. It is musical and colorful, humorous, and entertaining. Please watch for and tell others with children in elementary school about Where Does Gary Go? On YouTube, starting December 29th. December 29th, 29 de diciembre 2025. I'd like to shout out some new listeners. I have Biala, Egypt, Bucharest, Romania, and Dubai, all with new listeners to my last show. Welcome, and thank you for listening. Hey, Camden Town, London, I see you. Thank you to all my listeners there. I wonder how different the culture and English that I use on the show are from the ones you encounter as you work and live in England. Hey, Frankfurt, Germany, your numbers are growing as well. I really appreciate you talking about this podcast with your fellow men and women. Northern Spain is, as we say, in the house or represented today. Bilbao, Burlata, and Baracaldo, Spain. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. And one day I hope to see your part of the country up there. Let's have a cup of coffee. Please watch for the next episode of No Te Rindas Intermediate English Stories on the first Sunday of every month. If you wish to support this show, please go to patreon.com/No Te Rindas Podcast. And as always, thanks for listening.